tell you what I'm doing. So just a quick introduction of what I do and who I am. So I go by the title of Sneaky Artist on Instagram and everywhere else. You can find me quite easily if you Google. And urban sketching is really dear to me because this is the process that I learned how to draw and how I sort of accidentally became an artist. Becoming an artist was never part of my plans. I was going to be a writer, but I started drawing because I was in this very beautiful city and I was drawing webcomics at the time and I didn't know how to draw. So about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I used to draw stick figures because I didn't know how to draw any better than that. And I thought, if I'm going to be a full-time writer and cartoonist, I really owe it to myself to learn how to draw a little better. So I tried all kinds of things. I tried YouTube channels. I tried these books of how to draw with all the ideas about how to draw an eye correctly and how to get all the shadows right and how to draw with 3 different types of pencils. But none of it was exciting. None of it was interesting enough for me to do regularly. And so nothing really became a habit. And as a result of that, I wasn't really building up on skills. You know, the only way you learn how to draw is if you can do it again and again and again by repetition and reiterations. And in order to do that, at least for me to do it, I needed to be very interested and motivated. And these traditional avenues were not very interesting to me. So I found myself living at that time in the beautiful city of Chicago. And I thought to myself that I'm going to try something new. I'm going to walk with a sketchbook and I'm going to use it as an excuse to explore this city that I love so much, and also to draw whatever I find interesting. And if I keep doing it, I told myself this, that surely if I keep doing it, I'm going to learn how to draw. It can't be that difficult. So I'm going to take the screen away from myself and bring it to my desk because I want to, while I talk, I want to show you some of my work. This is a sketchbook that I just finished. I was in India for the last month. I came back last Sunday and I took a sketchbook with me, as I always do. I always have a travel sketchbook for all my recent travel over the past few years. And when I'm traveling, I like to be light with my tools. So all I was drawing with was this one pen. I use a Lamy Safari. This is a Lamy Safari fountain pen with a fine nib. I've used it pretty much every day for the last 6 years. It's very durable. It goes everywhere. It doesn't leak on board flights. You can fill your choice of ink, and it's been really great for me. It's the pen I love to use the most out of everything else that I have. So Sneaky Art began because I was really nervous about drawing in public and I was really bad at it. And I didn't want anybody to see me do this silly, embarrassing thing. So I thought I'm going to draw with a little sketchbook somewhere and I'll be really sneaky about it and I'll get out before anybody sees me draw. And meanwhile, I'll just somehow learn how to do it. Someone's asking the name of the pen again. So once more, this is a Lamy Safari. It's Lamy. Can I focus on it? I wonder. Let me see. I'm not sure if I can focus, but yeah, this is Lamy Lamy Safari. It's a fine nib fountain pen. And it's the same pen that I've been using for the last 6 years. Some people tell me it's a little bit expensive. I believe it's like $40, $45. But, you know, divide that by 6 and 7 years of use, and it's kind of okay to use it. So I started drawing from observation. I started using my sketchbook as a way to sit in unfamiliar places, in places that I wasn't necessarily comfortable as an immigrant, but giving myself permission to spend time in these foreign locations and to try to understand my world a little bit better. So as I kept doing it and I fed off my curiosity and I fed off these things that I found interesting to look at, I found that I was getting better and better at drawing. And later, a few weeks later, I would understand that this practice is known as urban sketching. And it's this thing that a lot of people around the world do. This is another sketchbook that I used over the summer. I was in Europe, in Amsterdam, visiting friends. And again, I made another travel sketchbook, which I'm glad to share with you. So I started drawing in this manner, and I started drawing with a fountain pen. I use platinum carbon black ink, that's right. And I started using a fountain pen because I'm also a very impatient person. I wanted to draw in 10 minutes, in 15 minutes. I didn't want to draw for longer than 45 minutes. This sketch, for example, took me half an hour before, just as apple pie and my espresso arrived. And I finished it just before my food arrived. And I wanted to draw very quickly because I wanted to capture very instinctively what I was looking at. And I wanted to get an impression of reality without necessarily burdening myself with trying to capture all the details and all the finer points and every little thing that I saw. So my art is a mix of all the various influences I've had. Minimalism is part of my aesthetic because I've always been interested in drawing comics, and comics always simplify reality in different ways. I grew up reading Calvin and Hobbes comics and the work of several Indian cartoonists, and they have been an influence in how I see reality and how I try to share what I'm doing. So this sketchbook is a moleskin sketchbook. This one that I showed you before is a travel accordion sketchbook. So it opens out like this. It's one long page and it'll just keep opening out. And it makes for a really nice display, but it also makes for a really nice single sketchbook for one journey. This is a more regular moleskin sketchbook. I believe it's 170 GSM, just over 150, which makes it suitable for carrying ink, but not so good for watercolors. If you want watercolors, I would advise something with 250 to 300 GSM. So I started drawing in this manner. This is my longest sketch of last year. It took me 1.5 hours. I was really, really happy at the end of it, but also really, really tired because, again, I'm a very impatient artist and I get very easily bored. My art also reflects these values. You can see how I take shortcuts around things that I find difficult to depict, and I focus on the things that I really want to draw. So if you're going to draw with ink, trees are very difficult to draw. So this is what I do. I draw trees with one long straight line, and I try to simplify their outer shapes without getting into the details. A lot of my work is about this kind of stuff, like trying to find shortcuts, trying to represent things without having to depict them in all their complexity. This is a good example. I wanted to draw this park and I wanted to draw the house at the end of it, but I did not really want to draw these two trees that were towering in front of me. So I had to do both, and this is the compromise we came up with. I can keep going through sketchbooks and we'll do that again later, but I think it's a lot more fun if I draw while I talk, and I invite you to also draw with me. I'm going to draw inside this sketchbook, which is an OPUS sketchbook. It's one of the basic sketchbooks that OPUS has, and I really like it. The ink I'm using, Joan, is waterproof. It's platinum carbon black ink. It's a waterproof ink. So yes, you can use it with watercolors. The accordion sketchbook brand is also moleskin. I'm not entirely sure if OPUS carries it all the time, because this is, it's not carried by a lot of art supply stores all the time. I tend to have to order it off Amazon. And Terry has a great question, which I'm going to answer by drawing it, because I can tell you how I simplify faces, but that's not really going to tell you very much. So I'm going to draw now, and we will see how these things go. In order to do that, I've come up with a way to do it, which is more interactive. So I have a document with various PDFs in it that I'm going I have a PDF document with various pictures in it that I want to share with you. Thanks, Pamela. So feel free to download this and you will be able to see the reference pictures that I'm using today. You can see this document now in the chat window. And once you've downloaded it, I'm going to start with one of them. And then for the subsequent ones, I'm going to reach out to you guys and ask you to tell me which one I should draw. That should be fun too. So I'm going to give you a moment to download this document and to open it on your screen. And meanwhile, I will do the same, and then we can draw. All right. So I hope some of you have it open at this point. Let me see, where is my window? All right. So yeah, should I begin? Maybe I can start drawing.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So I'm going to start with the first one. That's a lot of people at this outdoor patio. And then after that, I'm going to throw it open to you guys to tell me what I should draw next. And I'm going to try to answer a lot of these questions. So how do I simplify things? I hope you can see me draw, by the way. How do I simplify things? How do I look at this complexity and make it into something achievable, something that I can draw in 10 minutes? So let's try to do this drawing in something like 10 minutes. And while I do this, I want you to think about certain things. I want you to think about natural frames. So this is a phrase that I use often. Natural frames are frames that are just existing in your world. So when you pick the borders of your frame, you're looking at things on your screen or in your reality, which you can use as the left edge, as the top edge, as the right and the bottom edge. Inside these natural frames are where I find my subjects. Another thing I do, because I draw straight with ink, because I'm so impatient, is that it's important where I begin and where I go. So everything I draw is supposed to help me draw the next thing on the scene. I'm going to start this one with the people in the foreground at the bottom left. So the couple that's having dinner together. And I'm going to start with the lady. And the way I often start in person, out of pictures, in either case, is I like to start from the ears. I find the ears are a great spot to begin because you can go in all kinds of directions. I'm going to show you by drawing subsequent people as well. But in this case, let's begin with the lady at the bottom left in our foreground. I hope you can see me. Drawing with ink, I use a lot of long lines. I think it's very important to draw with long lines that can define your drawing, because your long lines are lines that only you make. So an example of a long line is something like this, which goes from one object to another without really bothering to complete one object at a time. And that's because it's really important when you're looking at your scene, and if you're drawing with lines like I do, it's really important to be able to break down this reality into the lines that you see. If you keep thinking about the thing that you're drawing, then it's very easy to get bogged down and put yourself under pressure about being able to represent it properly. But if instead of thinking like this, you simply look at the lines and you follow the lines, it makes it a much easier job. When I draw with a fountain pen, I like to use the reverse side of the nib in this way. I get a finer line. So for example, this being the normal line and this being a finer line. And also, I allow myself to make all kinds of discretionary decisions about how much detail I want to show. So if I don't want to show someone's face, if I feel like that's not really relevant to the purpose of this drawing, then I just don't. Also, I am, like I said, I'm a lazy artist. So there are things I skip over. I'm not really interested in showing you these flowers and these plants that are in the foreground, but they are taking up a prominent spot. So I have to represent them in some way. So I'm going to find a shortcut to do it. And that I like to do by just drawing the silhouette that I see and not really drawing the details. So anybody who sees my page knows that these are plants, but I don't have to do the effort of showing you exactly which ones and where the leaves go, because that's really tedious to do with a pen. I think some things are just easier to draw with brushes and with colors, and some things become much easier when you draw with lines. And I think about that when I'm thinking about what I don't want to draw. Okay, now this person who's sitting opposite her. Feel free to ask me questions in the chat if you're curious. If I do something that you want me to explain further, I'll be more than happy to do that.
There is a question here in the chat for you.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa would like to know, how do you sketch people without them noticing? Or do they? And what are their reactions?
Well, firstly, I'm curious about how people live in public spaces. My curiosity is around people who are busy with their lives. So they tend to not be the kind of people who will notice me. Secondly, I draw very quickly, a little more quickly than they would tend to notice me. Usually I'm done drawing a person inside a minute from first sight to the last line. Thirdly, I don't, I'm very concerned about this. I don't like to make people conscious, and I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable because of what I'm doing. So I never draw somebody who's sitting right in front of me. I wouldn't draw somebody who is, definitely going to notice. If I have a sense that they might see me draw, then I don't draw them. I draw people who are at least a few feet away from me, who are not necessarily looking in my direction, who are busy with some kind of activity, and who will in a few minutes be gone from my world. So I'm trying to capture this kind of reality, the people who we live around, but the people who pass through our world without us knowing them. And this also helps me ensure that I don't make anybody uncomfortable with what I'm doing. I'm really conscious of that fact because I'm also very conscious of myself in public spaces. As you can see, I go from all kinds of directions. If I'm drawing a person, I don't necessarily start from their head and go down. I would also just as quickly go from their hands up or go from another part of their body. And this is part of this process of breaking reality down into the lines you see. That's my job as an artist. I cannot just be preoccupied by what I recognize. So there's a difference between what you recognize and what you see. And you have to suspend recognition for a bit if you're going to draw a very complex world. And the more you start to recognize, oh, this is somebody's head, oh, this is somebody's nose or their hair, the more you tend to get bogged down by images in your mind of what that thing should look like. And you don't end up drawing what you see, you end up drawing what you already know in your mind it should look like. This kind of competition between images is very dangerous. It comes in the way of drawing in your native style. It comes in the way of expressing naturally what you want to express. So I think it's very crucial to try to break down reality in this manner, to just see these lines as they appear before you and not the person as you might recognize them. Okay, I'm going to draw this last person from the hand up, from the arm up. And let's try to do it as one long line and see how that goes. One of the other things I do when I'm urban sketching, because people tend to leave and the things I'm trying to capture are dynamic moments, is that I allow myself to pay less attention to the things I'm not curious about. So if I start the drawing from one part of the page, the more that I spiral away from that point of interest, I allow myself to give less time to those things. So less details, less time spent drawing, less lines to depict them, shortcuts like these kind of single line drawings. And this helps me to make that drawing more achievable. It's something I can complete in the limited time I have. And it also gives my drawings a bit of focus. It's my job to make it clear what I'm trying to show you. And I need to have a clear idea of that, a very fixed, small idea of that. And I need to not get distracted by everything else that's also in the picture. Okay, we've got a bunch of people now. Let's try to now draw one of these structures. So the big umbrella. As you can see, I'm not necessarily going in a fixed direction. I draw one thing and that makes it easier for me to draw the next. And now that I've drawn these guys, I have a reference point for where this umbrella should begin and how far up it should go. None of my lines are perfect because I'm drawing these long lines. None of my lines are precisely straight. But you know what? They don't actually need to be. We keep thinking that our art needs to be a certain way or it needs to be perfect in a certain manner. But I've realized over time that that's really an unnecessary burden we put on ourselves. Nobody really wants perfect art. What art needs to be is a perfect representation of you. And that means also the imperfections of your line work or of your ink work or your colors. So I have come to give myself more leeway, a little bit. I'm a little bit kinder with myself now. And the more I do that, somehow, interestingly, the better the art becomes.
So there's a question here, Nishant, from Penny. She's asking if you started drawing on the right and moved on to the left, if you were outside
Mhm.
and the ink wasn't drying quickly, how would you adapt your method?
Yeah, so that's a very great question because this is a very big problem for people who draw with ink. It's also, it depends a little bit on the paper you use, but also it depends on the kind of weather you're having wherever you are drawing. I do tend to go left to right for that reason, because I draw with my right hand and I don't want to accidentally smudge. I've used Stillman and Burn sketchbooks before. I've used Moleskine a lot. And in both of them, you have to give it a couple of minutes, otherwise it will smudge. So I tend to go left to right as much as possible. I try to find my subject towards the left side of the page, and my general movement is towards the right side of the page. I would never start here and go in this direction. I think that would just inevitably lead to smudging.
That's some great advice. Thank you.
I've just ruined so many good drawings by making this mistake. It's really infuriating. So you want to take care of this kind of thing. You should think about what you use. And this is, I think, exclusively a problem with ink users.
So there's a small request here. Do you think you can bring your phone down a little bit just so it's a bit closer
Sure.
to
Let me try to do that.
drawing?
Is that better?
I think so. I think that's a lot better. Thank you.
Yeah, great. All right, so now I'm going to come down, and you can see there are small imperfections when you do this. So my drawing is not going to be perfectly aligned with the picture I took, but that is not a problem. Perfect alignment. If I wanted things perfect, I would just take a picture. The point of art is not to be perfect. The point of art is to really be, like, to stay with your imperfections and to draw in the manner that is natural to you. And I've learned that that means embracing the things that I used to think of as my mistakes. So small perspective errors or small errors in things lining up is totally all right. So there are small, because again, I didn't put myself through the 10 or 15 minutes it might have taken to pencil these big shapes down and then to have them relatively still so I could draw them. If I tried to do that, by that time, most of these people would have left. But in the time that I'm doing this drawing, even if I was drawing this live, I think most people would still be at their tables and I would be done. So as soon as I get bored, which is kind of about now, I start to hurry up. And that can reflect in the art, in the drawing itself. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it shows in my art what I'm actually interested in, what my focus is, and what is not my focus. And this, especially today when you have so little time with your audience, it's unreasonable to expect that somebody will look at your art for 15-20 minutes. You usually have only a few seconds. If you're very lucky, you have like a minute. It's very important then to be able to focus and to be able to help your audience focus, to help them immediately see what you're trying to draw and why. So that's something that I think about often, and it gives me a little bit of room. I am a little easier on myself because I know that nobody is really expecting me to be perfect and nobody's expecting me to draw everything. And urban sketching really is the best thing to do that with, because urban sketching is moments captured out of reality. You're not expected to have all the time in the world. You're not expected to be able to revise your drawing again and again, to come back to that drawing that you made before. It's expected that what happened in the moment is what happened in the moment. And this is very liberating if you are struggling with problems of perfection. I really needed to hear these ideas. And I was very lucky that Chicago has a very generous and a very wonderful urban sketching chapter where I could draw around people and I could see these shortcuts slash hacks, techniques that they used to get their drawings done. And I could give myself the permission to do the same. We also have a really great urban sketching chapter in Vancouver, by the way, in case anybody's curious. The urban sketching chapter of Vancouver meets about once or twice a month, and you can find them on the Meetup app. And I'm a part of it. I try to organize meetups myself, and it's a lot of fun to draw with people this way, to meet people who are artists, but also people who aren't full-time artists, people who are just, taking time out of their day to sit somewhere and to look at the world and to make a drawing. It's really such a good way to spend your time. So now I just want to draw one more person, because I'm kind of done with this scene at this point. I'm looking for my natural frame. My scene began here, and I'm going to end it now with this person over here. And let me also tidy up this portion a bit, so at least these borders are filled. Okay, gentleman in the foreground. And just for the challenge of it, I try to draw his face from this different angle. And the reverse side of the nib to get some finer lines.
So Nishant, I have a comment and a question here in the chat for you.
Sure.
Linda writes, I'm impressed that you work in ink. So scary. What do you do when you think you've made a mistake?
Great point. There are little mistakes all over my drawings. I've pointed out some of them to you already. Over time, once you start to have a sense of the mistakes you tend to make often, like these idiosyncrasies of your own art, maybe you mess up perspective, maybe you mess up sizing. Over time, what happens is you learn how to account for them. So when I said I try to use one object to go to the next, that's something I learned how to do, and that helps me scale as well. And over time, you learn to minimize your big mistakes. Another thing you learn over time is that when you make the small mistakes, you learn how to hide them. So my sketchbooks have lots of little mistakes, lots of moments where I've committed something that I thought was a gross error, and two ways out of it. One is to hide it in some way, to obscure it with something, to if you mess up the look of somebody's clothing, then just give them darker pants and go over those bad lines. If you think you got the curve of their clothing wrong, then here's one way to hide it and to change it completely. The other thing I've realized is that most of our mistakes are not really so bad. Like, we're very unforgiving in the moment, but if you give yourself a bit of time, you will find that those mistakes are not really such a big problem. Another thing you will find is that mistakes are actually really good. So I draw a certain way, and a lot of these things can be called mistakes. And all of those things are actually my superpower. They make my drawing distinct. They make my art exactly mine and nobody else's. And it's unmistakably my art. And I'll share with you a quote from my favorite musician, Miles Davis, the jazz musician. And his quote was that once is a mistake, twice is an idea, and three times is style. So style is an accumulation of mistakes that you work with again and again, and then you get ideas from it, and then you use those ideas again and again, and eventually style emerges out of those things. I would ask you to not get rid of your mistakes and not try to minimize your mistakes all the time, but to really try to live to work with them, to see where they take you. Somebody asked why I don't draw feet, and it's because I'm bad at drawing feet. I mean, this is how it began. I was drawing figures decently after a point, but I was still drawing feet wrong, and I was drawing shoes wrong, and I was drawing slippers wrong. And every time I would do it wrong, it would quote unquote spoil my drawing. So I just stopped drawing feet one day, and I thought, let's see how this looks. Let's keep at it for a while and let's see what happens. And I realized that it's not that big a deal. Nobody tends to notice very much. And eventually, this becomes part of my style, and people recognize me for it, and they are made curious by it. But certainly, it doesn't devalue my drawing that I don't add feet. Not adding feet is just about as egregious as not drawing this person's chair, not drawing their legs, not drawing her face, her eyes, her nose, not bothering with the contours of her hair, and not drawing the rest of this drawing, which I'm not going to draw now. So I'm quite happy to leave this drawing here, the first drawing we made today. And for me, this is a complete drawing because it says what I want to say. It shows the crowd, it shows the liveliness of this moment, It's very clear that this is a patio. It's very clear that it's a sunny day and lots of people are outside having lunch or brunch or breakfast or something like that. So that's it for drawing number 1. And I'm quite ready to move to drawing number 2. Shelly asks if, since they're not waterproof, do you use different materials for larger? So Lamy pens, the pen is just the pen. I don't use the Lamy cartridge. I have a converter with which I fill my own ink, and I have platinum carbon ink, which I use. I can show you. Let me show you which ink I use. So this is the ink I use. It's called Platinum. The company's name is Platinum. It's a Japanese brand. And this specific ink is Carbon Ink Black. So they have lots of different varieties, I believe, but this is the one that I use and I really like it. Could I repeat the quote? Yeah, Shardlin has shared it as well. Once is a mistake, twice is an idea, 3 times is style. Glad to hear that, Linda. Thank you. So for drawing number 2, I'm going to throw it open to you guys. You can see the pages of this PDF. Tell me which page I should go to. Tell me which drawing you'd like me to make. And that's the one I'm going to make next. So Sana is asking to draw the people on the subway, the train. That's the Mumbai local. It's quite busy all the time. It's quite amazing that it's this empty. You can see standing room, and I'd love to draw that one. Someone else asked for page number 3. So impressed that I can draw and talk at the same time. Thank you, Anne. People think that it's really great that how good an artist I must be that I can draw and talk at the same time, but it's actually that I'm really good at talking. People on the boats. Yeah, that's a good one too. So that's a scene from Kerala. I believe this is actually an advertisement picture for Kerala tourism. And that's why it's so perfectly composed. And we're going to do it, but maybe let's see. I think there's a lot of interest for the boat. Yeah, let's do the boat first then. Let's do the boat and then let's go to, let's do the boat, then we can do the train, and then we can do the Vancouver Street, which is, I think it's a picture from the 70s or the 80s, as you can see from the cars and the gas prices. So page number 2, we're doing page number 2. We're going to draw this scene of the boat. There are people in the backwaters of Kerala where you can hire these boats. In the back, you can even see a houseboat that people can live in. And I'm going to draw it here. I think you can see it clearly. And interesting to think where to begin. So there are three boats in the foreground. There is the back, and all of it comes together. So I'm going to start with the woman in the sari, in the yellow sari. And then we're going to draw the rest of this boat. And then I'm going to draw the background. And then I'm going to draw the other 2 boats. So starting with her. Let me just zoom out. Okay. Again, let's start from the ear. Because from the ear, you have 3 directions to go now. I could go up and I could get her scalp. I could go in this direction, and that's her jaw. I could go down her neck, and then we can do her shoulders and her posture and the clothing. So I think this gives me a lot of information and it gives me a lot of freedom. I can keep coming back to it and I can go in different directions starting from here again. In this case, I want to go up. And I want to make one long line for her face. So now I've got the face, I know which direction it's looking, and I can add other things. So these are shortcuts that I've picked up because I was urban sketching and not vice versa. Because I was trying to capture things in the real world, I was trying to draw in cafes where people would perhaps sit for 15 minutes, but you never know how long, you never know when they might leave. And because I had to then work at speed in order to finish a drawing, I learned to take these shortcuts. I I thought about my own dissatisfaction when the sketches weren't complete. I thought about what it is that dissatisfies me. What is it that I wanted to draw that I didn't get to draw? And maybe those are the things I should draw first the next time. And I got into this cycle of making sure that I was never quite unhappy, even if my drawing was interrupted. And by doing this, by putting myself in this situation where I could be unhappy if my drawing was interrupted, I learned to look for the things that are very important to me. And I learned to hone in on these things that I wanted to definitely draw, the things that were most important to my sense of composition and my sense of art. So inadvertently, urban sketching, drawing in chunks of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes just a couple of minutes, it led to a better understanding of how I want to draw, what I want to draw, how I'm seeing my world. And it made me a better artist to do it this way.
So Nishant, I have a few questions here for you.
Sure.
A little while back, Eileen was wondering if drawing perspective and proportions came naturally to you, or if you or if it was developed through practice.
Well, I'd have to say it's a mix of both. I don't like it's really, it would be so nice for me to be able to say, oh, I just worked hard for so long that it was the toughest thing in the world. But I do have a bit of education to back me up on that. I don't have an art education, but I do have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. So I did a few years of mechanical drawing, which is kind of like perspective drawing. At least it helps you see lines and it helps you see where lines go and to draw them a certain way. So I did have some quote unquote training on the subject, but you know, how you choose to draw, how you choose to show perspective, which perspective you choose to focus on, and how you either minimize or emphasize perspective. These are all choices I made as an urban sketcher. I could make it very difficult for myself if I always decided to draw the most challenging perspective scene that I found. If I always felt obligated to draw it a certain way because people say that's what you should be drawing. But I've been very conscious about what I want to draw and what I don't. So if you see my work on Instagram, if you see the sketches I post, you'll see me take a lot of choices and make a lot of distinct choices about what I want to show and how I want to depict it. Every time you go out to draw, you have all these options. You can sit somewhere, you can stand instead, you can go 10 feet to the side, and suddenly that view is totally changed. And to exercise those creative decisions, to take those decisions, to exercise that discretion is an important part of being an urban sketcher. You can use it to play to your strengths. If you feel perspective is not your strength, you can always minimize perspective and you can focus on other things that you can draw very well. These are choices that I've learned to take over time after many, many dissatisfying sketches and things that felt like I'm doing wrong and I'm not able to get this at all. And of course, from looking over the shoulders of other artists and seeing what they do, you get a working knowledge of perspective over time. I think I have that at this point, and that has made a lot of things much easier for me. I know what I'm looking for. I know how to represent it. I know how it will go wrong, and I can sort of work around it before it does.
Thank you for that. Very inspiring. And do you always, when you make art for yourself, is it always urban sketching, or do you from time to time just stay home maybe and sketch from a picture?
Well, I really enjoy urban sketching. Like my art is this way because I am also very curious to explore my world. And most of the drawing I do, perhaps 90% of the art I make is urban sketching. It's all outdoors and I love to do it. I want to be outdoors and I want to see it this way. I'm not very well suited to working at my desk because I'm not very patient. I don't give myself the amount of time I need to. I don't always think about, I don't go over my drawings again and again. I don't work for very long hours. I like to go in one stretch, just as I'm drawing for you right now. This is how I like to draw. I like to draw quickly. I like to draw from instinct, and I like to be done with my drawing as well. So most of my work tends to be urban sketching. Very little is at my desk. when I work certain commissions, inevitably they are at my desk and I have to work out of pictures if I can't be there on location. I try to tend to be on location. Like next week, I'm going to, no, next month. Next month, I'm doing a super exciting commission. I'm going to be drawing at someone's wedding. And they've invited me to just attend the ceremonies and draw whatever I want to draw. So that's going to be very different from other wedding commissions I've taken, in which people have asked me to draw out of pictures. And I'm really excited for it because I feel now my best work comes out when I draw on location. The way that I'm drawing right now is not exactly how I would draw if I was drawing on location. I feel like the drawing on location would carry a kind of life that this doesn't. There's a sense of safety to this drawing. I know this image can't change. And there's a sense of adventure to drawing in person.
Thank you for that, Nishant. So it seems like we're having a bit of a focus problem with your camera.
Oh,
You may need to just bring it, I guess, we got you to move it closer, but we might need to get you to move it back a little so that it doesn't jump with the focus.
oh, I see. Let me see how this
Kind
looks.
of, it's going in and out in
Okay.
small little pulses.
Let me try it now for a minute and you can tell me if it works, okay? Otherwise, I'll zoom out.
Okay. Okay, that's looking good so far. Well, it's always an adventure here on Zoom, everyone. And when you first started drawing, did you originally just dive in and start using pens, or did you start off with pencils and then decide to just brave it with the ink?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I was a very perfectionist kind of person, and I used to use pencils before. I felt obligated to use pencils, as a lot of people do. And the trouble with that was that I would keep erasing and I would never make the right line, and I would change it and I would change it and I would change it. And this is very unhealthy because then I never went through enough drawings. So I very consciously, before I was good at it, I decided to use a pen. I decided to use this fountain pen that I was already writing with. And I did it because I wanted to not be able to erase anymore. I wanted to go through a volume of drawings without this power of erasing them and just finish. I told myself that if I make a bad drawing, the only way out of it is to make another drawing and not to change it or to improve it, because I was just not very suited to that kind of editing and that kind of improvisation. I would just get more and more frustrated with myself. So I decided that I would draw with a pen before I could. And the decision was based on wanting to go through a volume of drawings, not have to really edit and not think about editing, just make another one. If I make a bad drawing, I make another one after it. And another thing I picked up from this is really that most of the drawings are not as bad as you think they are if you just stick with them. There are so many cases where I have made a drawing that I thought was not good at all, and I kept drawing from 30% to 50% to the 70% point, and it just felt like it's not good, it's not good. But all I can do is finish it. I can't change it. And by the time I reached the end, I would somehow rescue it. And this is part of the magic of urban sketching. I've realized that you can rescue your drawings. You can go over your mistakes and minimize them. And this is only possible when you push through, when you don't erase. And it's not that I think everybody should work like this. It's just that this is the thing that has been most suitable to my temperament. And it's made me a more relaxed person, and it's made me a happier artist to do it this way.
I love that, the power of completion. And did you go to school for engineering because you wanted to, or because it was expected of you?
It was both. So it was definitely expected of me growing up in India. It was one of the career paths that is considered safe and responsible. So I definitely was pushed into that direction. But I'm a very curious person. I always wanted to know how things work. And I was good at it. Like I was good at engineering. I worked on race cars before as a mechanical engineer. I also have a master's degree. I studied way too much. I went and got a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I studied in the Netherlands in this university called TU Delft. It's in the famous little town of Delft, where Vermeer is from. And I lived there for a few years and I got my master's degree in biomechanical design. And yeah, it was fun. Like I love figuring out how things work, and I'm very glad for my education. It gave me a lot of skills. It has given me a lot of understanding of this world we live in. But I was always creative. I was always writing stories, poems, and movie scripts, and jokes, and comics. And I wanted to keep doing that. And I just reached this point where I realized that I had no business continuing with science because I really, really wanted to give all my time to writing. And I took this very brave and very uh, partly foolish decision. I was in the middle of a PhD program. I was working on it was my PhD program was something in between biomechanics and neuroscience. I was working with stroke patients and doing these crazy experiments with brain imaging and things like that. And I realized I wasn't very happy, that I had sort of run out of curiosity and I needed to go where my curiosity was taking me. And so I decided to quit my PhD and become a writer. I don't have any training as a writer. I don't have any business being a writer, just as I don't have any business being an artist. But I really wanted to do it. And I was able to convince people around me that this was a good thing for me to do. And here I am, just chasing curiosity. And it has led to the art. It has led to somebody buying my art one fine day. Somebody said, "Hey, that's a great drawing. I want to pay you for it." And I thought that was just crazy, but sure, I'll take your money. And I kept pushing in the direction of things that felt good, in the direction of things that made me curious and got me excited. And that led to becoming an artist. That has led to a lot of the writing I do now. I write every week. I write about sneaky art on a Substack newsletter that I send out to thousands of people every week. And I have made a book about my art as well. All the art that I made in this town in Wisconsin where I was staying at the time. The book won a couple of independent publishing awards, and it's been really fulfilling. Like I now work on my own challenges. I think about what I want to do, and it's my job to make it a reality.
Very inspiring.
Rose has a very good question. Am I still leaving art out in the wild? So, if you're an independent artist, I don't know how many of you are, but you get this sense that your art is only what other people say it is. And there is a sense of losing control and losing strength in these thoughts. And I decided I wanted to take back control of this idea and I wanted to really own my work. So I did this very silly counterintuitive thing, which is that I started to leave art in public spaces for people to find. I left some in Kerrisdale. I left some at the David Lamb Park. I left it in wherever I would go sketching, wherever I saw free library. Vancouver has many of those. Wherever I saw free library, I would leave a drawing inside it, either a print or an original drawing even. And to do it, it gave me a lot of strength. I started feeling more in control of my own fortunes. And I also really love this idea of sharing art with people. I feel like art is meant to be shared with other people. And some of the valuation ideas around art are quite absurd. And I don't want to live in that kind of world. So I give out art every week. I give not necessarily in the wild, but my readers on Substack. We do these little writing competitions every week. We write stories for the characters I draw, and I give them art in exchange. I give them postcards, I give them prints, I give away original drawings. And I love this idea. I love giving away art, and it makes me feel so powerful and it makes me feel in charge of my work. All right. So I think this is my complete drawing for this scene in Kerala. I could add more details. Like if I wanted to add more details, maybe we can use the Micron fine liner now. So I carry this with me sometimes. It's a Sakura Micron fine liner. It's very, very thin, 005. You get all kinds of grades, but I like this super thin version. And I use it for adding more value to what I'm drawing. So I add hatching lines, and it gives a little bit of three-dimensionality and a little more character to what I drew. I'm going to do that now here. Find my shadows and emphasize them. How would you draw water? Good question. I would not draw water. There are certain things you can draw with lines and certain things you really shouldn't try to, because it would be super messy and super difficult and it would get in the way of your other lines. So there are certain things that I just don't depict, and I let the white space do the job of depicting it. So here I feel like I don't need to draw the water. There are boats, they are recognizably boats, and there is a coastline on the edge, a shoreline. So anybody looking at it is able to recognize that this would then be water. So I don't really need to do the job of drawing the water, just as I don't need to do the job of drawing the sky. It's obvious that this is sky. But I am going to do something just to make it a little, just to add more details to what I'm drawing, which is that I will add some of the reflections on the water through hatching lines. And I do vertical hatching lines for vertical surfaces, but for horizontal surfaces, I do horizontal hatching lines. And let me try to do that from what I see in the picture.
Question here for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you do commission, do you use your sketchbook or do you use paper sheets? How many sketches will you do?
For commissions, I work out of paper sheets. So I use Arches paper. I have Arches hot press paper. It's about 300 GSM, and I really love the quality of it. And I think it's the more responsible thing to do, because when people commission me for art, I think they want to keep it in their homes, which is such a great privilege for me to make something that somebody wants to display and keep in their homes. So I draw it on the best quality paper I can find. I don't want to tear something out of my sketchbooks and give it to them, because it might have that appearance of being torn. And I don't like that. I don't want them to have that either. My sketchbooks are private spaces. They stay with me. I only sell prints from my sketchbooks in case somebody wants a drawing that I've made. I never give out originals from the sketchbook itself. And all commissions are on loose sheets of Arches paper. Arches paper is also available at Opus, and I think it's just the best quality paper you can get.
Thank you. And on the topic of art materials, your Lamy pen, when you go to clean it, do you have to clean it every time you use it?
Not really. I think you are only obliged to clean it maybe once in like 7 or 8 weeks, like if that. Like I don't think it's very necessary to clean it regularly. It is less necessary to clean it if you use it regularly. So I use it every single day, which means I don't really like it. Never, the ink is not drying inside, and it's never going to get clogged up in that manner. It does look a little dirty if you look at it, like there's a lot of ink here, and this is 6 years of use, so there's a lot of residual ink here and there, but it works beautifully. And occasionally when I do need to clean it, I think the advice is just to run it through cold water, running cold water, and then leave it inside cold water for a bit and then let it dry naturally, which I do maybe once a couple of months or so. It's not that big a deal. Like these are very durable things.
Thank you. And while you're working right now, Terry would like to know how often you look at the subject compared to your paper.
So it's become less and less. I draw quickly, and one part of drawing quickly, especially when you're drawing in person, is to see quickly, which means that you need to capture more with one glance. You need to have a clearer picture from 1 or 2 glances of a person. I can't have my head bobbing up and down all the time. That can be a little bit conspicuous and a little bit creepy. So I have learned over time to look less often and register more quickly. When I'm working at my desk, of course, this is not a factor. So I can do whatever I want, and that's okay. But in person, for sure, it's not as much as it used to be, and I'm glad for that.
And the shadow work that you're doing right now, is your Micron pen, is it a black pen or is it a gray pen?
This is a black pen. So all the ink I use is black ink. I have not yet used gray ink, although it's something I am curious to look at soon. But yeah, this is so it's a very simple equation. I have a thick line, I have a thin line, and I have a thinnest line. So these are the three lines that I'm working with. And as a result, the drawings, I use these three line widths for different purposes. Some of them can be used for shadows. Sometimes they can be used for to show depth. So shadows is what I've shown you so far, and patterns as well. But you can also use it to emphasize that something is very far away. The micron I'm using, Eileen, is 005. You can also use 003. It's just something that like I just wanted to use the thinnest one because I often draw very small. And so I wanted a thin one. But so one thing else you can use your line widths for is to emphasize depth and to emphasize what is far away and close by. So the background of this scene here with some certain foliage, I could draw with this and with these continuous lines, and it is very clearly far off in the distance. It's not something that's close by. And it sets it behind and it pushes it back, and that pushes forward the rest of the lines that are thicker and makes them a little bit clearer. To emphasize this for a subject, what I might do is use a thicker fine liner. So here's another one, 02, and I'm going to use it to emphasize that this is my foreground. And what this will do is it will help this foreground or whatever my subject is to pop in front and to look more prominent compared to the rest of everything that's on the page. So I think this would finish this drawing for me. I think we've got some details. We know where we are. We can see that there's water. We can see there are things over here. We can see there's stuff in the back, but I didn't really want to draw the trees so much. So I just wanted to suggest what they are. So I made them with long continuous lines without bothering about the details. I also skipped over a lot of little things in the back because I just didn't want to draw them. And this makes it my drawing because it's filled with my choices and my editing. The more you focus on your choices and your editing, the more clearer your style becomes. Again, mistakes to ideas to style. All right, should we go to another drawing? Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tammy and Kathy. Sana is asking, how do you choose what to draw? You have seen some of my sketches having holes in them and you really like that look. How do you choose what to draw and what to leave out? So let me just look through a sketchbook in order to explain this kind of decision making. Yeah, so here we are. I'm a writer first. So one technique I do is I think about what I want to draw, what I want to show you. For example, okay, so I wanted to show people having drinks together at the bar. I did not necessarily need you to understand who they are. I did not need you to know what their faces look like, and I didn't want them to be recognizable to you. I just wanted to show a bunch of friends having a conversation at the bar. So my drawing is the most accurate reflection I can find of doing that. Their hairstyles are something I bothered to show you. I did not draw any feet except I drew one shoe, which is, there's no reason here. It's just something I did. I can't really say why I did it or why not. It's just something I felt like doing. And a lot of art is like this. You don't always articulate reasons for this decision or that. But if you do have this feeling that there is a decision you want to take, you should really go with that feeling. Someone has asked to see some buildings, and that's a good question. I don't always draw buildings. They frustrate me, all the parallel windows, but I do sometimes. So this is a street in Amsterdam where we were having apple pie again. And I met with a friend after many years, and he's in the foreground and the buildings are in the background. You can see the difference in line width. So I've done a thick border over this foreground. Then this middle ground is with the regular pen. And then this background over here is with with the reverse side of the nib. So it pushes it back further. There's a lot of the idea that I'm going to stay with what is interesting. I wanted to draw my friend while we were having coffee and apple pie in Amsterdam. So I wanted to emphasize some things that make it Amsterdam, but I don't necessarily want to show you more than that. So everything, as I spiral away from my object of interest, I spend less time with, I give it fewer lines, I give it lesser attention, and I depict it more quickly. This makes it a manageable drawing. It makes it something that I'm able to do while I'm having coffee without, ignoring conversation or becoming lost in my work. This was a 15-minute, 20-minute sketch at most before our coffee arrived. So it was easy to do, and it was manageable to do then, and I was not too distracted. I could be in the moment with them. And for that, I took all of these choices. This is a very complicated building, no doubt, but I made all of these decisions about what I wanted to show and just jumped over the things I didn't want to do. There's no real reason why this, why not that, but it's really about just didn't think about doing it, just didn't feel like doing it, and stayed with that feeling. So this drawing was made at dusk, so the details were vanishing very quickly. I had just drawn this bridge, and by that time the background had gotten a lot darker. All I could really tell was that were the windows, because the lights were on in all the houses. So I made sure to draw a lot of boxes for the windows, but I just darkened the rest of the screen to emphasize how little I could see myself. If I can't tell the differences, if I can't tell what's happening, that's what I'm going to depict with you, that I can't really tell what's happening here. This is one of the more detailed ones with a lot of details of the buildings. Had to spend a lot of time here. I started the drawing from this point. I drew down. I drew a train. Partly I drew this tram. Well, I drew this tram because I didn't want to draw the doorway of this building. It was really complicated and very difficult, and I just didn't want to do it. So I took the opportunity to throw a tram in there just as it was passing by, and it helped me hide something that could have been a mistake in my drawing. Then I drew this lady, and I used her reference to know where all the rest of the heads would align. This is my horizon line. And then I went to the background. I went to these trees. These trees also helped me obscure a part of this hotel, which was very difficult to draw. So I'm glad for these trees in this spot. They became also my white space, because then there's a lot of lines here, there's a lot of lines here. And if this was equally detailed, you wouldn't really be able to tell them apart. They would all sort of blend into each other, and the drawing would be too busy for you to tell them apart. So white space is very useful because it helps you see the other parts that are more detailed. Again, this is the background. This is not the subject, so it is less detailed. You can see me make all kinds of editorial decisions ad hoc about what I want. And then I came to the international theater, which is what I really wanted to draw. Again, this is the point where this is the focus of the drawing. This is where everything was coming out of. And I made sure to draw lots of people just as I spotted them one at a time. And I went to this building and I drew this front structure. Then I went into the details of it. Then I drew the back of it. And then I came down this way, and with this dustbin and the rest of this page.
And were you, do you stand while you draw, or do you have a little chair that you bring with you?
Great question. I don't bring a chair because I always forget to bring my chair. I have a chair, which I've never, ever taken with me because I keep forgetting. This drawing was made sitting down. This one was made sitting on a ledge. So I was at a normal chair height. And this was when I was on the ground, on the grass, looking at the Rijksmuseum on Museumplein in Amsterdam. Kathy, yes, this is a Moleskine sketchbook. This one was made standing. I like to draw standing. There are several subjects that you can't portray. You don't necessarily have a spot to sit. And this means that I take sketchbooks which I can hold in my hand. So this sketchbook is the largest I would use outdoors because I can always hold it in my hand very comfortably and stand and draw. I stood resting against a pillar in this case, and that was quite comfortable. It does mean certain imperfections in certain lines, but hey, that's part of the experience of drawing on that location. Let's see what else I can find that I drew standing. This I drew from below the level of the ground. This is at this level, there was a bench that I was sitting on my side of the canal. This was made sitting on the grass with friends, sitting on a couch. So this was an interesting one. My friend is quite dramatic. He makes these dramatic poses for a few seconds at a time, and I really wanted to capture it. So this drawing was made in a very interesting way. I started from here and I went down it without having drawn anything else on the page. I drew one long line like this. And I came all the way down here, accounting for the cushion, accounting for the sofa, accounting for his legs and his body. And then from the other direction, I went down again and I joined them here. And then I went into the rest of his face very quickly. So I drew his pose without him finding out that I'm doing so in less than a minute, because he was going to change his pose. Once I had it, I fit the rest of this drawing to it. So I fit these cushions to the drawings that I had, to the lines I had made, and the couch to the lines I had made, and this table to this lines that I had made. Now, you don't have to draw perspective accurately. So there is a difference here, and there is a phrase that I like to teach people about, is the difference between accuracy and precision. Accuracy is how exactly right you are, how absolutely 10 out of 10 you can be. Precision is not how right you are. Precision is how consistent you are. So if you make the same question, if you always hit 8 out of 10, but you always hit 8 out of 10, you're not very accurate, but you're very precise. So that's what my sketches are. They're not very accurate, but they're very precise. I make the same kind of mistake, quote unquote. I make the same kind of decision every time. And so when you see this drawing, it's not accurate, but it is very precise. It makes sense. Within the context of this page, these lines make sense. They are consistent with each other. And that is something that I believe people appreciate about art. You don't have to be accurate. Photographs are accurate. You can leave the job of accuracy to photos and videos. All you need to be is precise in your things that you draw well and the things that you just abstract your way through. So this drawing is a consistent drawing. It brings attention towards the thing that I wanted to show, which was this building in the back. And the white space here complements the details around it and helps you to see and appreciate all the life that I drew. On this page, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 people. It doesn't look like that kind of page that has 14 people on it, but I have 14 people here. I also do a lot of these drawings in order to teach myself to draw. Let me show you another sketchbook for it, which is a lot of fun. I have a book of what I call tiny people. So this is my book of tiny people, where I draw things just on the side of the street, sitting in the corner streets of cafes, corner chairs of cafes, and looking out at street intersections. So I try to draw people before they leave my line of vision. If they are at the light, I have maybe 10, 15 seconds to draw them, right from first sight to the drawing I make. So I learn how to make these, take these decisions, how to cut down on certain details, how to represent other things in a minimalistic way, how to draw certain things and how to not draw certain other things. Decision-making like this is very important to do. It's very important to get out of the zone of hesitations and second thoughts, and to just be in the zone of drawing and depicting quickly and instinctively what you see. And I train myself to do that. I drew this while doing my interview with TransLink last month in December. And doing this is very useful because now I have a shorthand for drawing people. I have a shorthand for how to depict different postures, different activities, how to represent equations, how to represent dynamics between different people. That's been a really important revelation from this, how to show that two people are standing next to each other and they know each other and they're talking to each other. So this has been a lot of fun to do, and exploring this and understanding through tiny people, as I call them, is a lot of fun because everywhere I go, I find tiny people. And if I give myself a few minutes, I can draw them. Let me show you something I drew in Calcutta when I went home last month. So these are the people of my home city. And I sat in an open air mall and I drew all of the people that passed by, all of the people that I saw doing various interesting things. And it was just so nice to connect with people in this manner. It's so nice to look at people and to have a sense of what they're doing and to capture a little impression of them before they vanish from your world. It helps you appreciate them. It helps you appreciate the different things people do in public spaces, the different ways that they are living out their day and their lives. And people who are in line for food are always fascinating. There was a family that was waiting for their movie time. Lana, that's a great question. Thank you, Sue. I do intend to publish a book of tiny people this year. It's one of my big plans. If you follow me on Substack, if you follow me on Instagram, you can stay in the loop for that. But it's definitely something I'm doing this year through, I think, maybe a Kickstarter or something like that. So I want to make a big book of tiny people, and it's one of my big goals for this year to get that done. I was at a wedding in India, and I made sure to draw tiny people off this wedding. It was a family wedding, and I have another sketchbook full of those drawings. But this is one page from it. So when everybody was at home and everybody was, all the family members were arriving one by one, I made tiny people out of these people that I've known all my life. So should we do one more drawing? Do we have time, do you think, Pamela?
Well, we've got 15 minutes still. I
So-
vote yes.
Okay, I can do that. Should we have a vote for which drawing to make? Which one should I draw? Can you pick one out of the PDF, guys? Maybe say something in the comments. Metro, suitcases, and Vancouver skyline. Let's draw something with people in it so I can show you specifically how I draw people. So let's draw these two ones. I'll draw them very quickly, so they will be very strongly edited, and you'll get to see the sense of the tiny people drawings. So I'm going to start with the people with the suitcases. This is on page 4, on the top of page 4. And I'm going to show you specifically with respect to this tiny people style. So they're going to be small drawings, but the idea, I'm going to make them a little larger than I would otherwise, but the idea is to show you how different shapes merge together. And I'm going to start from the leftmost and I'm going to the rightmost. I'm not going to obey different objects, borders. I'm not going to draw one thing and then go to the other. I'm just going to go where the lines take me. And feel free to draw along if you want, or just watch, and maybe you can draw along afterwards. You have the PDFs now. I like drawing with these long lines because then the drawing takes on a character that, more deliberate drawings don't have. So far, I have not lifted my pen off the page, I think. This is still a single line that I'm working with. Done. So let's draw some. Let's come back and finish some of these objects. Something else in the back as well. Bit of a table. And then this person here. So let's go up. And this is still one line for them. And just for contrast, and because it's, in this case, they are wearing black, but it also helps me to add contrast to make this solid. So you can differentiate from the rest of the objects here. And then something to tell you that this is a suitcase and it's quite full. Also, of course, a foot. And the reverse side of the nib, or let me use the thinner pen to do the lines of their hair. To zoom in. Again, a long line. So I already drew her hand, and now I was just connecting her shoulder to her hands. This is a technique I found in case you have trouble drawing arms. Try to draw the hand where it is first and then connect the shoulder to the hand. And that makes this problem a little easier. A lot of the troubles we have drawing a certain way, you can solve them if you just approach that challenge from a new point of view, from a new angle. A lot of the problems we have are often problems because of the order in which we are drawing things. And if you change that up, suddenly your brain sees those lines in a new manner, and it becomes not so much of a problem anymore. I'm glad to help, guys. I urge you to find the joy in your sketching. Find the thing that you're curious about, the thing that is fun to draw, and don't think about the results so much. The reason I draw so much is because it's so much fun to do it. The time I spend drawing is just irreplaceable, regardless of skill level. It is the same amount of fun always. When the more we get predicated with results and whether it looks good enough, that concept is very poisonous, and it keeps you from drawing as much as you need to, as much as you should, as much as it is fun. So maybe just try to cast out that unnecessary idea of, am I good enough? Does it look good enough? It's completely irrelevant to the idea of drawing. This is simply urban sketching, drawing in my world rather than looking into my phone is simply the best way to spend time. I'm really glad for every time I do it because I feel like I have done a good thing with my time. And this has nothing to do with how the drawing looks. A sketchbook like this is a great sketchbook to have. It's a cheap sketchbook. It's easy to go run through the pages. And if you feel like I don't want to waste a good sketchbook, firstly, there's no such thing. But if you do, then something like this Opus Value sketchbook is a great one to just run through the pages. You know what you should do? Here's my final advice, since we have just a few minutes. Here's how you should start a sketchbook. If you have a new sketchbook and you really want to get through a lot of drawings, here's what you should do. On the first page, you should write, this is a sketchbook of bad drawings. Give yourself the permission to make bad drawings. If you only set out to make good drawings, the the good ones are never going to come. You have to be willing to make the bad stuff, and you have to really enjoy making the bad stuff. The joy you get from a drawing is the same regardless of whether it's a good drawing or a bad drawing. The time you spend drawing it is the joy you get. And we have to be tapped into this joy and not think about the end result and the goal that you reason that you drew, and not think about these bullshit words like whether it was worth it. Did I waste my supplies or did I waste my paper? These are just poisonous ideas that don't help anybody.
And what size of sketchbooks do you usually take with you urban sketching?
Good question. So usually I prefer something that I can hold in this manner. The largest sketchbooks I use are like this Moleskine sketchbook. I think it's 5.5 by 8.5 inches. Because again, I can draw it holding, it can stay on my lap, and it's not, I'm not very conspicuous either. But I always change my sketchbook. So once I'm finished with one, the next sketchbook I buy is always a different one, different brand, different format, different size. So this is my book of tiny people, much smaller. I can draw, I can hold it very easily. I just bought a label and stuck it on. And the reason I like to use these small sketchbooks is, well, it's less conspicuous. It's easy to take it out in a public spot and draw with it. It's also very easy to finish a drawing. You can make a drawing inside this page very quickly, within 15 minutes, within 10 minutes. You have to give yourself the space to draw these quick drawings, just to, like I've taught you a lot of quick drawing techniques right now. And the idea is not that all of you become quick artists, or that, drawing quickly is not a superpower or some kind of virtue. The reason to draw quickly is that it helps you to see quickly, and it helps you to get into this zone of looking past your hesitations and your second thoughts. It's a good idea to go very quickly from this is what I find interesting to making that final drawing on the page. It's a good idea to know what you find interesting very quickly. When you're out with friends, to know this is how I might want to show them. These are friends I was meeting after 4 years. Here's a little baby that I met who's like my nephew in a way, a niece in a way, because very close friends, and it's their child. And I knew that I wanted to draw, but I also really wanted to play with the baby. So I needed to draw very quickly. And so I went into this drawing instinctively and immediately, and then I finished it very quickly as well. We have to get over this bridge of, should I draw? Can I draw right now? Is it okay for me to draw right now? These thoughts are just unnecessary thoughts. And the shorter we make this gap, the quicker we go, especially when the light is changing from idea to finished drawing. And then, of course, you're allowed to draw however you like. You're allowed to draw with pencils and erase as much as you like, but you should not hesitate whether you want to draw or not. And that's the reason why it is good to practice quick drawing. All right. Can I answer any more questions? I think we have just another minute or so. Thank you, guys. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. Sorry to jump in. That was beautiful. You're amazing. And thank you, Opus.
Thank you, Gina. A Tiny People workshop. Yes, I do give Tiny People workshops. I'm going to do one in person soon as well, but meanwhile, I'm going to do one over Zoom. I talk about this with my Substack readers. So you should find, actually, here's the link. Just if you can I go to this? Yeah. So if you can scan your phone on this code, on this QR code, you'll be able to find links to all my work. Of course, my Instagram is easy to find, and then you can find links. But I talk about the workshops I'm doing. I do teach how to draw tiny people just like this, how to draw. I want to do some in person this summer, but I will be doing them over Zoom as well and teaching how I do this. So I'm glad for your interest, guys. And thank you so much. Natalie, if you're not able to see the QR code, just find my Instagram. I'm the Sneaky Artist. I'm very easy to find now. Of late, my Instagram has blown up a little bit. So you should be able to find all my links there, and then find the rest of my work and how I communicate with people.